For a long time, we had an ongoing joke that we'd misread a fortune cookie, that he'd received a fortune cookie that said, "You will be rich and famous," and that we thought it meant he'd be wealthy. But no, it meant that he was already named rich and that he would be famous doing open source software, which nobody would ever pay for.
I think what makes programming languages interesting and also difficult to an extent is that a programming language is an encoding of a philosophy of how to think about code. And Clojure definitely has a philosophy that is different than other languages.
Fundamentally, what is Clojure about? Can we make programs out of simpler stuff?
It introduced a whole community of developers to an idea that you can build a program out of pure functions on immutable data structures.
So I'm trying to provoke you today to just reconsider some fundamental things.
I just didn't get it. So my first experience is, this is a crazy language made by a Lisp fanatic for other Lisp hobbyists. I really didn't take it seriously.
Clojure is the language for cranky, tired, old programmers.
Open source means a lot of different things to different people.
When you open source something, you don't owe anybody anything. Like, you're giving something away for free.
I did make it for myself, which I think is an important thing to do.
It was just different. It's different from what people expected from programming language projects.
My name is Hickey, and I'm the creator of Clojure. I got into programming for music using computers for recording. It was still before you were able to record audio in a computer, but I was definitely intrigued by the software that was being used and eventually taught myself how to make similar software and taught myself C and started programming. It was a great time to be an enthusiast in programming languages. There weren't languages that were dominant. There were articles about Lisp and Prolog and various languages that would never become mainstream because it was still sort of an open field. It wasn't as entrenched as it's become now in terms of there's a few very dominant programming languages. Around 2000, I got a proper Common Lisp environment, LispWorks. I was just blown away. I basically thought to myself, what have I been doing, with my life, with my time?
My name is Eric Thorsen. My organization was the earliest adopters of Clojure. I used to work for this chain of music stores, and Rich was setting up a recording studio.
One of the things you get to do when you start a new recording studio from scratch is buy a lot of gear. And he worked at a music store, the nearest music store to my studio.
We got to talking, and he casually mentions that he's writing some editing software for this digital sampler, which kind of blew my mind because I thought only companies could do those kinds of things. They had to be like Yamaha to do something like that. So I was very impressed.
He was doing some database programming, DBase, I think, at the time. And I was teaching myself C, because I got intrigued by the music software I was using in the studio, and eventually sort of got to know each other as programmers, as we both became programmers.
At some point, I had the courage to pick up the phone, and I called him up, and I asked him to tell me everything he was reading, which he did. And that became the beginning of a long-term friendship that I've had for almost 4 decades now.
What's some of your background in computing and language design and that kind of thing?
I've been working as a professional programmer for a couple of decades, specializing mostly in broadcast automation and scheduling systems, also the National Exapol and various machine listening kinds of problems.
At some point, he started getting into Lisp, told me to get the On Lisp book by Paul Graham. And I had actually thought at that time, I knew Rich probably for 15 years, he sort of lost his mind. It's so far off of anything that's commercially viable. Why is he looking at that?
At the time, I was working on yield management systems and other, schedulers for music software. It was much better being able to be focusing on the problem and not trying to get the language to do what I wanted. Coming up to 2005, I was working more and more as a consultant, and I started to do some of the consulting work in Common Lisp. It was so easy to do. The problem was, having written something in Common Lisp, my client, the radio software company, said, we have no one who knows Common Lisp and we don't want any Common Lisp. And I actually ended up taking this yield management system and having the Common Lisp code generate SQL code. which they were familiar with and they were ready to run. And I encountered that a few times on a project. I'd design something in Common Lisp and they'd say, okay, that looks great. Can you give it to us in C++? Because that's what we know. And so I was rewriting things from Common Lisp into C++. And even though I was an expert in C++ and sort of a newcomer to Common Lisp, it took me longer to rewrite in C++ than it did to write it the first time in Common Lisp. And I said, this is a definite problem.
That friction between how easy it was to express what he wanted to in Lisp and how hard it was to do that in C++ at the time is part of what happened with Clojure. He was solving a separate problem, but he was so frustrated by that. He's like, I want to have what I get from Lisp into something that I can use commercially.
When I started doing Clojure in 2005, I had already been programming for 18 years. So I'd had it. I was done. I was tired of it.
So I had done a few projects to try to bridge the gap, to make it so that I could use Common Lisp, but somehow connect to something my clients were willing to run. One was .lisp, which was a Lisp interpreter that targeted .NET because we were doing .NET development. And then JFly was a way to embed the Java virtual machine in Common Lisp. And then Foil was a way to have Common Lisp talk over a wire to Java or the CLR to the .NET runtime.
I didn't know how he was going to make this work. And then when he started to tell me he was going to build these translators where he's going to have a Lisp dialect and then have it generate Java code and another one generate C# code.
These all let me write Common Lisp code and interact with something that clients wanted, but the clients still didn't want that. And so I started thinking about how could I maybe compile this language into the JVM's bytecode or into the CLR. And that was the initial impetus for maybe I should write a programming language.
There's no reason to write a new programming language unless you're going to try to take on some problems. You should look at what the problems are. I mean, why was I unhappy as a programmer after 18 years and said, if I can't switch to something like Common Lisp, I am going to switch careers. Why am I saying that?
I'm Stephanie Hickey. I'm Rich's wife. I've been his partner for about 20 years. My first impression of Rich was that he was very sweet with a super strong core of integrity, strength, principle. He's very smart, very thoughtful. I would say old-fashioned in the best way.
Having thought of maybe I should write a programming language, I found myself possibly able to take some time to do that. I have some money I could use for my retirement, or I could use to sort of fund a sabbatical, a self-funded sabbatical, and I decided I would take 2 years and work on whatever I thought made sense to me.
It wasn't a surprise to me. It was very consistent with who he was and what he aspired to, which sort of to be a serial inventor and to have the freedom to invent. You really need to be literally free to invent and just to have the headspace to work on whatever was compelling was really important. At the same time, oh my God, that's a big leap of faith.
So these are the papers that comprise the research for Clojure. I've divided them up into a few subject areas. This whole column is papers about Lisps and Lisp techniques, equality, binding, arity, closures, a little Haskell and Stream Fusion. This is a set of papers about other programming languages, Self and Smalltalk, Lua, Scheme, Haskell, Erlang. This set of papers is about the JVM and compiling to the JVM, bytecode, also other languages and how they did it and what their experience was. This, the biggest of all piles, is about dispatch, type classes, dynamic dispatch, predicate dispatch, Common Lisp object system. And what's interesting about this is that this was all in support of something I decided not to do in the end, which was give Clojure an object system. But I read all this before I decided it was a bad idea. This set of papers is all about the persistent data structures, or really about functional data structures. And finally, the Phil Bagwell paper, which was the inspiration for Clojure's persistent data structures. And finally, this whole column was research behind software transactional memory, and a lot, obviously, of Haskell papers on that. That was all the things I read on the hammock. Working is about the thinking time more so than the typing it in time. One of the great things about having taken a sabbatical was I was able to say, I don't care about the outcome. And not being outcome oriented lets you examine everything because you're not prejudging it by its, validity in terms of what it could mean to other people.
For the whole development process of Clojure, we talked so much.
What Steph did for me that was just the most valuable gift possible was she was willing to listen to me go on and on.
It was a funny time because if I said, how are you? What are you thinking about? What did you do today? I mean, this was what we talked about at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner.
I needed that. I needed to be able to talk about what I was engaged with, and she was willing, which was a major gift.
I got a master's degree at night, and it was moderately helpful for my career, but I would say it was super helpful for my marriage. And we had a joke, if you remember the old MasterCard commercials, master's degree, $30,000, understanding what your husband's talking about, priceless. What nobody else will ever see is that I probably have 25,000 hours invested in Clojure without touching anything ever, just learning enough that I could be, hopefully, a support and a sounding board.
I knew the storytelling around Clojure had to be such that even though it was a functional language, it had to have a credible story for doing mutation and the things programmers, at the end of the day, they need to do to get their jobs done. So software transactional memory seemed to be a thing that would cover their needs. It ends up that once you start programming in a functional manner, you don't need it that much. But at the time, I couldn't know that. Whether or not it would work, there's sort of two levels. Does it work technically? Does it do what it's supposed to do? And, would anybody be interested in trying it? The latter, I was definitely unsure of. In fact, pretty sure it would be forever a very, very small set of people, if any, that would try it.
Well, guys, welcome to Lisp NYC. Tonight we have Rich Hickey. He's going to be talking about Clojure.
A couple nights ago, I walked down to Lisp NYC in the East Village to hear Rich Hickey talk about Clojure, his new Lisp-like language. To be honest, I wasn't expecting much. Another Lisp? Ho-hum. I'm sure it's very clever and cool and all, but not something I can actually use. Instead, I was blown away by Rich's presentation. Clojure might just be the Lisp I've been waiting for.
My name is Rich Hickey. I'm just a regular old software developer. I've been doing it for about 20 years.
I'm Alessandra Sierra. I was an early participant in the Clojure community, and I wrote some of the libraries that eventually became part of the Clojure Standard Library. Lisp NYC used to meet in a small church on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and a bunch of nerdy people would get together once a month and talk about Lisp.
The nature of the meetup was Lisp programmers, and it was actually quite common for people to come by and show their pet Lisp, their toy Lisp or something that they had built.
His talk was probably more polished and prepared than a lot of the, hey, look at my new language talks that people did. And there was definitely a lot of interest and excitement in the room.
There's a phrase called talk-driven development. And talk-driven development is when you agree to a speaking engagement and the thing you agree to speak about isn't yet finished. So it was a very busy, 6 weeks in there or whatever it was between when I agreed and when I gave the talk.
Well, first, why don't you just tell me what Clojure is?
Clojure is a dynamic language. It's a dialect of Lisp, and it's really founded on four ideas. If you're going to say Clojure has 4 legs, it's functional programming, Lisp,
being hosted on Java, and the fourth is concurrency.
I'm Alex Miller. I have been on the Clojure core team since 2013, and I work as the Clojure team lead at Nubank. The first time I saw or heard about Clojure was Stuart Halloway's blog series looking for the next Java, investigating different languages on the JVM that were all sort of coming out at that time.
My name is Stuart Halloway, and I am an architect in global platforms at Nubank, and I've been working in Clojure since 2008. In the mid-2000s, languages had kind of fragmented. We'd gone from everybody must work in C or C++ and Java to there were a lot of things out there that were possible. I had become aware of the possibility of using a Lisp, reading Paul Graham. I think a lot of people read Paul Graham in those days, Beating the Averages and Revenge of the Nerds, essays about what matters in a programming language.
People say that they don't like Lisp because, it doesn't talk to the operating system, or they can't hire people who are programming in it. Maybe it's just that they're terrified if they look at the program and think, oh my God, I don't know. And it really matters. I'm not sure what to do about this.
I'm Chowser, and I'm co-author of Joy of Clojure and have been using Clojure since very nearly the beginning. I've always been hunting for a language that, checked all the boxes, the things that I wanted it to be able to do. Paul Graham's On Lisp book really convinced me that I wanted to use a Lisp, but Common Lisp didn't work well for me for the project I was trying to do. It didn't have the libraries that I wanted. At least I couldn't find them.
My name is Mike Fogus. I am a member of the core team working on Clojure on a daily basis. I was looking to get into a Lisp. I was looking to discover that mystical side that Paul Graham was talking about.
And so I'd looked at Common Lisp and was trying to figure out, how do I actually take that and get it rolling somewhere? And then I noticed on a mailing list or somewhere, I don't even remember, somebody had created a Lisp that was targeting the Java virtual machine. And so now it's you don't have to solve the problem about how do I run this? Right? In Java, everybody's a jar file. It doesn't really matter, where it came from. So that part of the question was solved. And so I started looking at Clojure. And at the same time, I looked at other languages that were offering more expressivity on the JVM.
Clojure and Groovy and Scala and Ruby were all coming onto the scene, and people were like, maybe there's other ways to do these things. And I felt like, just for a little bit, the world kind of opened up and people were trying things.
So everybody has different languages, Groovy and whatnot, and they love the differences between these languages, and I want you to focus on the similarities between these languages, which is they're all single dispatch, stateful, object-oriented languages.
I did a series of blog posts called java.next, where I was trying out a bunch of different languages, and I had originally intended to do, some arbitrarily large and lengthy comparison. But by the time I got through the fourth blog post, I just stopped thinking about the other languages and kind of committed myself to Clojure.
If you rewind the software world to 2007 and say, you know what? I have a solution for you. It's a dynamic, functional, hosted Lisp. Asked for no one ever. Nobody was looking for that.
My name is David Nolen. I am the lead developer of ClojureScript. What I liked about Clojure, especially the standard library, is you sort of see the entire language being built up from a very simple thing, and by the end, you get all the language features. And then Clojure took that and added this innovation, which was very nicely designed persistent data structures to go along with all the good ideas that Lisp already had.
The cool thing about Clojure is that it fully integrates with the Java programming language. I think one of the problems with Lisps in the past is the lack of library support. But by being on top of the JVM, that problem is solved in Clojure. And Clojure definitely has a lot of traction and quite a strong growing community.
There's a lot of parentheses in Lisp. And part of what was really nice about Clojure is there were far fewer parentheses and more use of other symbols to make the code a lot easier to understand. The other thing that was really exciting when I first started to use Clojure is it always seemed to do what you wanted it to by default.
The core ideas are building everything out of a small set of universal data structures: list, vector, map, and set, which covers a huge range of different kinds of things that you might want to represent or work with.
I was doing a lot of work with concurrency at the time. We were getting these massively multi-core chips, and we were trying to build programs that could leverage those things. And I had done a lot of concurrent programming in Java, and it's something that's very error prone. You have to use a lot of locking and know about a lot of techniques to make that safe. And Clojure's approach was really to focus on immutable data, which meant that whole classes of problems just didn't exist anymore.
What's your favorite non-Java JVM language?
So that one's a pretty easy one, and that's Clojure.
One of the things that Clojure forces you to think about ahead of time is resilience. You see that people are able to, get a lot of work done with a surprisingly small amount of code, but then continue to evolve those systems as requirements and goals change because of the focus that Clojure sort of pushes on you of everything's going to change around you and you need to, just accept that that's going to happen.
The biggest thing, I think, the most desirable thing, the most esoteric, this is tough to get, but boy, when you have it, your life is completely, totally different thing, is polymorphism a la carte. Right? Clojure protocols and Haskell type classes and constructs like that give you the ability to independently say, I have data structures, I have definitions of sets of functions, and I can connect them together, and those are three independent operations. In other words, the genericity is not tied to anything in particular. It's available a la carte.
It also just seemed to be a practical language. It was designed for solving real problems. It wasn't a toy or an experiment. It was a real working language for working programmers.
Clojure is really fast. There's 10 times as much to Clojure as I've shown you, but it does fill a nice niche. There is no dynamic functional language on the JVM. Now there is. It's Clojure. And I've only been out for a little bit less than a year, and uptake has been rapid, extremely rapid.
So when I first joined the IRC channel on Freenode, February 1st, 2008, besides Rich and myself, there was only one other person there.
So I continued to work on Clojure, and I would just have the IRC open all the time. And whenever I was around, people could hop in there and ask questions, and I'd answer them. And there was a lot of dialogue then with the very first few people who were there.
I found it very exciting that there was an avenue for me to go and talk to the creator of the language and have an impact on the way that the language was evolving. Rich did take his time to sit on the IRC channel and talk to people and explain why the language was built the way that it was, what the value propositions were, and even at the time would take recommendations for functions that people felt were missing or behaviors that they felt were not quite right.
The Lisp community had a kind of a reputation of being not terribly welcoming. It's probably the easiest way I could say that. And I think he really wanted to make sure that this was nothing like that. Any question that came up, he was on top of it. It seemed like almost 24/7, like he was just monitoring the chats and making sure he was supporting people the whole way.
Rich, in no uncertain terms, said that we were a community about support, mutual respect, actionable criticism, and we wouldn't tolerate anything less than that. Today, so many years later, just seeing that still continues through the community is kind of amazing. And through force of will, Rich brought that about. And I can't say the same about many other programming communities.
Oracle and other people have adopted modified versions of this post to a mailing list as standards for how to behave in other communities.
So I joined the IRC channel, and it was kind of a great environment. All different types of programmers, whether it was Java programmers, Python, Ruby programmers, C, C++, whatever. It was just like an interesting group of people with lots of different backgrounds. And, we were all in this channel being like, how do we use this programming language and like functional programming? Because to be honest, I would say that not that many people that were trying Clojure at the time were familiar with things like Haskell, which has a much more rigorous approach to functional programming. So the early days of the community were really cool. There was a lot of knowledge sharing about what's the best way to express this pattern. Coming from imperative programming, there's just a lot of things to unlearn.
It's one of the anecdotes of Clojure that we got to 100 people on the mailing list, which was a very high number. I thought that would be the maximum number of people who would find out about it and try it. But when I saw it reach that in the time frame it did, I said to Steph, we might get to 500 people on this list.
And he's like, oh, maybe we'll get to 500, maybe we'll get to 1,000. And I know I'm supposed to be the support of life, but I was very much like, don't count on it. This is niche software. Yeah, don't count on it. And of course, he ended up at something like 30,000 followers and, a huge audience for his recorded talks.
The other critical thing about simple, as we've just described it, right, is that if something is interleaved or not, that's sort of an objective thing. You can probably go and look and see. I don't see any connections. I don't see anywhere where this twists with something else. So simple is actually an objective notion. That's also very important in deciding the difference between simple and easy.
Clojure popularity was really closely tied to Rich's ability as a communicator and his willingness to go and communicate in a bunch of places.
He was talking at the time about the nature of time and identity and how software needs to reflect processes in the real world and what that means for identity and time and state. And I think that was an early, who is this guy and where did he come from moment.
The work that we're in is conceptual work. So when we start talking about something being outside of our capability, well, it really starts trampling on our egos in a big way. You do have to take your great ideas and figure out if they're actually great. Unfortunately, I think we continue to use place-oriented programming, and the rationale is gone. And the sadder thing is, we continue to make new things that are like this, brand new programming languages and brand new databases. A big part of the adoption of Clojure were the sets of talks that I had given. And that started with the first Lisp NYC group. But over the first year or so, I had about 9 talks that I was invited to give. And then the talks became keynote talks at various places, including Strange Loop and the Simple Made Easy talk.
I invited Rich to Strange Loop because I knew that he was a great speaker and that he had a vision that he was really trying to bring to the world of programming.
I was there to see Simple Made Easy. That was a huge, huge talk. I'd constantly come back to that.
And the critical thing to distinguish it from simple is that easy is relative, right? Playing the violin and reading German are really hard for me. They're easy for other people, certain other people. So unlike simple, where we can go and look for interleavings, look for braiding, easy is always going to be, easy for whom? Or hard for whom? It's a relative term. Before I got on the plane to fly out to the conference, I did not like it. I don't really know why, because it ends up I didn't change it much.
He's just like, it's not that strong, it's not that insightful, it's not that technical.
So I was going to be the last talk of the conference. And so for 3 days, I was holed up in my hotel room, missing the conference, sort of finessing the talk, wondering if it made sense to someone other than me. Users not looking at our software, and they don't actually care very much about how good a time we had when we were writing it, right? What they care about is what the program does. And if it works well, it will be related to whether or not the output of those constructs were simple. In other words, what complexity do they yield? When there is complexity there, we're going to call that incidental complexity, right? It wasn't part of what the user asked us to do. We chose the tool. It had some inherent complexity in it. It's incidental to the problem. I didn't put the definition in here, but incidental is Latin for your fault.
The people that were there were looking for something. They were seeking, languages and ideas. So it was just that perfect confluence of the right speaker and the right audience at the right time.
People watch and they really love it. I think that people really feel it within themselves that there's a lot of complexity in software, and we have a lot of trouble managing it.
In particular, if you want everything to be familiar, you will never learn anything new, because it can't be significantly different from what you already know and not drift away from the familiarity. That talk is responsible for more people investigating Clojure than any other. It's certainly the most popular talk I've given by a lot.
I have never watched this presentation, and everybody has said this is the greatest presentation of all time. Simple Made Easy, Rich Hickey, 2011. I kind of feel like I've missed out on some lore here.
If you take away 2 things from this talk, one would be the difference between the words simple and easy. The other, I would hope, would be the fact that we can create precisely the same programs we're creating right now with these tools of complexity with drastically simpler tools.
All of a sudden, I was a very in-demand public speaker, being asked to talk at all these conferences.
Thanks very much for inviting me. I was told they always like to have somebody who's really way outside of the community. So that would be me.
It was exciting. It was quite exhausting. So I did it, very intensely, probably for 5 years. I was critical, I think, to expose Clojure sideways. The creator of Clojure is giving this talk, so maybe you look at Clojure if the talk is interesting.
There's a huge number of benefits to using values. We recognize them, right? Look at our information systems that we use for ourselves. We're proving we already know this. Right? We don't overwrite our logs. We don't overwrite our source control. We're in the space age for ourselves, but we need to be in the space age for the businesses we're supporting.
When you think about his talks, Clojure is in them often, but that's not what the talk is about. It's almost always about the problem space he's discussing and some often new approach or perspective. And then he may introduce a feature of Clojure that may address this, but it's often about the bigger problem.
Those early talks enabled people to engage with the set of ideas instead of just walking up to something that looked different and trying to figure out why those differences would matter.
The bottom line is simplicity is a choice. It's your fault if you don't have a simple system. And I think we have a culture of complexity. To the extent we all continue to use these tools that have complex outputs, we're just in a rut. We're just self-reinforcing.
Around the time of the 1.0 release, it was definitely a big deal. It was a major milestone. Probably a lot of us never even thought it would get that far, that there would be something that we could call a stable production release.
Well, I met Rich Hickey at the JVM Language Summit, and I had already been following the Clojure community, and Rich and I had been exchanging emails. So definitely went with the intention of meeting him and getting to know him better, which I did.
At some point, Stu came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Stu Halloway, and I want to write a book about Clojure." And I said, "Great." He kept working on the book and running stuff by me and trying things. And eventually, he and the publisher said, "Boy, it would be great if this book targeted a .0 release version of Clojure."
I don't think it's necessarily critical that one came first versus the other, but I think it's important that they were reasonably close. The reason is that, having a book is kind of like a small mark of validation for a programming language.
We're back on the No Fluff Just Stuff 2009 tour, and today I'm with Stuart Halloway, and Stuart has a new book just coming out. Actually, it just came out on programming Clojure. Stu, why don't you share with us where you see the value add with Clojure within the JVM space?
I went back and looked at the chat room logs around the time of Clojure 1.0's release, and I had forgotten how much it was sort of teased and we were talking about it for months before Rich decided we were there. I think I remember him saying, maybe not in the chat room, but talking about pouring concrete on it, right? Like before 1.0, we were still sort of okay making breaking changes, but after 1.0, we wanted to sort of lock it down, right?
So I released Clojure 1.0 May 4th, 2009, announced it on the Clojure blog.
It was the point that solidified the language. Okay, this is what Clojure is. And there were obviously changes after that and a lot of additions, but the core didn't really change. Again, Clojure code written for version 1.0 almost certainly should still work today.
Now that 1.0 release was the last .0 release of Clojure, because I'm not actually a big fan of version numbers and what they mean. But it did matter a lot to the community. I think, again, when you talk about barriers to adoption, if a language isn't at 1.0, people think it's unfinished. I think the numbers are kind of arbitrary, but anyway, it was a milestone, and we met it. And most of the code that he put in that book still works.
In 2011, I watched Simple Made Easy, and I thought, well, this guy doesn't sound crazy. He doesn't really sound like a fanatic, except maybe for simplicity and practicality. And, he's really not all that esoteric, except for maybe those Latin definitions are a little esoteric. But all the rest was intensely practical. And so I thought I have to give this a try. So over the next couple of years, I was having fun, playing around with Clojure, but I wasn't really ready to commit.
My name's Christoph Newman, and I'm the Clojure developer advocate on the Clojure core team. After several years of my friend telling me about Clojure, finally I said, okay, I have to make a project. I have to try this. So my very first serious Clojure project was for an esports production with a hard deadline and a lot of attention.
The project was for Heroes of the Storm, and I needed to create a tool for that competition.
A lot of the people who were coming to Clojure were people like myself who had worked on these giant, complicated systems and were just tired of it. And Clojure let them create systems in a way that really did bring joy back to programming.
But I love to tell the story of when I first introduced Clojure to my team. Right? These are a bunch of senior software guys who had done a ton of Java, C++, C#. It was really fun to watch my developers get wickedly excited about what they were able to express in such a small amount of code that they were like sharing these little puzzles, like, oh, look, you can do this, look at this, look at this. It was like this fever that was going on in my company that people were like, I want to use this. Can we use this thing? And of course, it's plugged into Java, so you can use it.
My name is Eric Normand. I've been using Clojure since 2008. So I like to read old papers, like research papers. And very often you'll read something from the 70s that's like, I built this little thing and here's how it works. And in something like Java, like I couldn't imagine writing it. Like it's too big, too complicated. I have to make classes for this, classes for that. But in Clojure, I can do it in 100 lines and just try it out, right? So it's like a language that gets out of your way and lets you express things really concisely. It basically opens up this world that's been forgotten because we're just moving so fast into the future in our industry.
My name is Nathan Marz. I've been programming Clojure primarily for 15 years. The reason I just really enjoy using it on a daily basis is that I feel like I'm always working on impactful code as opposed to just like code that just has to be there because of the restrictions of the language. If there's any sort of repetition in anything you're doing, you can abstract that away, whether with a function, right? Or if you can't do it with a function, then you should be able to do it with a macro. Every line of code I write in Clojure matters.
So I was trying to learn new ways of solving problems that I already knew how to solve, but the limitations of Clojure, the intentional limitations of Clojure, made it so that those solutions were not really available. So I had to figure out new ways of solving a problem. And I had to do that on a deadline. And so some of those coding sessions were very long and very late, but I got it done. I went to the event and it was exhilarating.
Fewer language constructs, fewer demands, less hoops you have to jump through. By separating time, state, and behavior, you don't have to hold all that in your head, so it's a low cognitive load. The problem is central, not the language demands.
We're talking to Aaron Bedra, and he has a company called Relevance. Could you tell us a little bit about what your company does?
So Relevance is a software consultancy, started in 2003 by Stuart, Halloway, and Justin Gatland. It is a full-service software shop. Ruby, Clojure, and actually all kinds of different languages.
I started at Relevance in 2010, and it was still a small consulting company in North Carolina, still mostly doing Ruby on Rails development to pay the bills. Stuart Halloway was the main driver toward really betting on Clojure. He was the one who I think really pushed to start hiring people from the Clojure community and try to build up this Clojure development practice.
Hi, I'm Stuart Halloway, and we're going to talk about the Clojure programming language.
Justin and I at Relevance were looking for a way to invest in building something more than a consultancy. And we had actually been approached by venture capitalists saying, hey, you should be the Ruby on Rails shop. And our thought about that was, there is a Ruby on Rails shop. DHH has a shop. You should go talk to him. By meeting Rich was an opportunity to start at the beginning with somebody who it was his thing.
And Stu and Justin wanted to do something with me. And We thought we'd be talking about doing a Clojure consultancy or Clojure core or something like that.
They were getting together, they had an agenda, and the couple of days building up to it, Rich had been thinking about other things, and he was like, I'm just gonna, before we get to the agenda, present them with this idea and see what they think.
Eventually, he came to Durham, and we met a few blocks from where we're sitting right now.
We're in their big, the relevance, whiteboard room, which has a big whiteboard all on one wall and all on this other wall. And it was early in the day, and I started up in one corner. I said, I have this idea I want to run by you, and I started writing on the board.
And so then for like 2 hours, he unrolls this disquisition on databases and the history of databases and how, with a Clojure mindset, you could do something totally different. The left-hand half, this yellow brick building, is where we were when Rich Hickey came to town, and Justin and Rich and I met to talk about building a consultancy around Clojure, and he surprised us with this idea about building a database that became Datomic.
I mean, how many people think dealing with databases is easy and trouble-free? Nice. Most people don't.
As he talked, our jaws just dropped and dropped and dropped, and I don't think we took very long deciding that we would build a database product using Clojure, and that would be the thing that we would make together.
They got it. They were interested in doing it. So we put together a small company called Metadata Partners, which was just sort of the first way we worked together. Fundamentally, Datomic's a database. And the overarching goal is to move away from a monolithic notion of what constitutes a database to one where the facilities of a database are distributed, and in particular, substantial portions of the power normally attributed to the server in the database are moved into your application servers themselves. I knew Datomic was something bigger than I could deliver by myself. So a lot of financial institutions, they like the idea of Datomic. It has great auditability and tangible transactions, and sort of how your database got to be the state it's in, and you've lost nothing because it's append only or sort of accrete only. A significant portion of Datomic users chose the database first and the language second.
Clojure was new and different to people. Datomic was even more new and different. And so we came to realize that we wanted to benefit from the connection between the consultancy building Clojure and Datomic projects and Datomic the product. And so that was how we decided to create Cognitect. Metadata Partners and Relevance became Cognitect, and I joined Cognitect. And the mission there was to do both Datomic as a product and Clojure Consulting as a service.
I could see that Clojure had grown to a point where they needed somebody to really work on Clojure and deal with managing the infrastructure for builds and the tickets for problems and talk to the community and run the conj. And I happen to have the skills to do all of those different things. So I reached out to them and said, I think you have a me-shaped hole in your organization and you should hire me to fill it.
Because a big part of what Cognitect did through that time, in addition to sort of building Datomic and having a consultancy, was Cognitect was the sponsor of Clojure. I mean, basically, Cognitect was paying my salary and the salary of anyone else who worked on Clojure, and also sponsoring, development in the community. So we saw Alex's hire as an investment in the community. He was probably the first Clojure team member that was dedicated to Clojure at Cognitect.
I think it was around 2013, 2014 when Clojure started to feel like it had a lot more momentum behind it. And there was a very brief window of time when it seemed like it might have been the next big thing.
Being a modern girl, I wanted a modern Lisp with all the bells and whistles and power. So I wanted to do it in Clojure, and Clojure's got a lot of nice features.
So my name's Anthony Markar. I work at Walmart Labs as a Clojure developer, and I'm going to talk a bit about Clojure at scale.
We didn't see a path to VC money, doing anything but putting a fire under the pursuit of growth, but then you have to figure out how do you exit, and that was not something we ever really felt comfortable about doing.
We were often frustrated ourselves at what we were unable to do. We didn't have the resources to devote to advertising or big splashy conferences or something that you might expect from a Silicon Valley startup.
I think we valued our independence over anything else, and given the people we are, that makes sense.
When you have an open source project, people arrive with whatever expectations they have, and if those expectations turn out not to be what they get, they might be frustrated or unhappy. The people who were into Clojure because they thought it might be the next big thing very quickly got disappointed because it didn't have the same unbelievable pace of growth and development that viral projects had. I think some people learned how to deal with it or sort of made their peace with it and found their way to continue working, and some people left, and that was okay.
You are going to probably have to interact with other humans while you write software. This is going to turn out to be more challenging than your interactions with the computer.
I think the thing that has caused the most contention within the Clojure community is how contributions are handled.
A lot of people were submitting patches, expecting them to be approved and accepted, and they put a lot of work into those patches, and then you don't even hear anything. From a community perspective, it looks like they don't care.
It meant that a lot of people had to accept that their role in the development of Clojure might not be what they had hoped it would be.
A lot of people think open source means that it is a community-run project that if you meet some minimum bar of code quality or something, that you can contribute and be a part of it, make decisions, submit patches for code, fix bugs. A lot of people expect that from anything that calls itself open source.
The hype around open source software at the time had created this illusion that anyone could contribute at any time, but obviously that doesn't work if you're trying to maintain a coherent, stable piece of software.
So let's clarify something very important first. Everyone can contribute. You do not need to be a genius to contribute.
Great hackers also generally insist on working on open source software, not just because it's better, but because it gives them more control.
To me, open source was about making Clojure in this case available to people in a way that maximized their ability to use it, to give it and share it with people. And at the same time, I think there was a lot of culture and social media around open source being a collaborative endeavor. I think that it can be, but I do think that an open source project should be run in whatever way the people responsible for it think is best.
And this is actually the title of a post that was sent to the Clojure community. The post started out, F Clojure. There, I said it, and God, it feels good. I say it with much admiration and respect to all the community members.
Yeah, so the Open Source About You post was sort of a way to be more explicit, quite explicit, about how I saw this distinction between open sourcing something and making it available and the community development model that people had expected. And I wanted to make it clear that when they expected, a certain kind of development model, they were making expectations of me and the other people who were working on the project, who were working pretty hard on it. It was certainly born of some frustration. I think that people who haven't run a large project with a lot of users don't kind of understand the emotional toll of having all the feedback funnel down to you, and especially the fact that negative feedback has 10 times or more the impact of positive feedback in terms of your emotional state.
I encourage everyone gnashing their teeth with negativity at what they think they can't do. Instead, pick something positive they can do and do it. Beautiful line right there. Rich.
Yeah.
Nice.
P.S.
Good life advice.
This is just, you just do this on Twitter. Your life will become a lot better if you just do that.
his reactions were kind of raw and emotional, which was not usually how he communicated.
I knew I had to protect my own emotional state and my creative process. And so that post was a way to sort of articulate, this is how I see it working. And I think, like all things I've said, it had my name on it and it's still up. And, I said it and I don't retract it. But I was certainly hurting at the time when I wrote it.
Clojure in many ways is a personal project, right? It was Rich's personal project. And in fact, he designed the project in such a way that it could remain like more or less a personal project. It's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 people that work on the language.
He wasn't working in that fully collaborative model that I think a lot of people were expecting open source to be.
A good cohesive open source project does a lot of saying no. There's the obvious saying no, which is like idea comes in and it's bad, you say no. And then there's what is surprising to people who haven't done it for a while, which is an idea comes in and it's good, you usually still say no, right? Because if you don't say no to most things, you get something that doesn't make sense in combination.
This is a code retention diagram, so it shows when code has been introduced, colored by year, and then what happened to that code over time. So if the code got changed or removed, you would see that band would diminish across time. And you can see, I think, what I would call a nice layer cake in Clojure, in that there's a high degree of stability.
The internet is sort of tuned for a faster speed than we typically work at. So we have had challenges over the years with trying to convey to people how we work and how we want to work with community.
Early on, I don't think I could have argued, for the fact that, well, if you take this trade-off and you allow for a conservative process that doesn't say yes to everyone, what you will get in the end is stability year on year.
Our users expect that the code that they wrote 10 years ago runs for the next 10 years. And it has, and it will, and that purely, fully collaborative open source model is not the way that you get a language like that.
I don't think we've made the best, leverage out of our community that we could. I think there's a lot of smart people with great ideas, and I would like to do more to let them participate in the process.
Now we're on the other side of, 18 years. And if you ask people, I think you'll find that a lot of people value the stability of Clojure quite highly. And that's what makes it something that you can use for professional development, because it will continue to behave, and that the team that makes it is super concerned about stability. It's a trade-off for sure. And we took this path. In the early days, the biggest problem was getting other people to understand, especially both of our parents. Like my dad never got my plan. When I would explain, what open source was and what a programming language was, and that I didn't expect many people to use it and that I could never sell it. And he just didn't see how that added up to anything viable. But actually, I think some of our biggest challenges were much later. We had been doing Cognitech for a while, and having spent down retirement savings early on, we didn't really know how we would be able to retire. Clojure was successful, and we were comfortably making a living, but did not have a recipe for retiring.
Right, comfortably making a living, presuming we just kept working forever.
Right.
That you had the reputation to do that, but yeah, there was no not working.
Cognitech didn't really have an exit strategy, so that was something Stu and Justin and I were working on when we started talking to Nubank.
My name is Edward Wible. I was a co-founder of Nubank back in 2013, and today I'm a distinguished engineer at Nubank. Nubank is a greenfield startup financial institution. It's a bank that started in Brazil.
I'm Lucas Cavalcanti. I am a distinguished software engineer at Nubank, and I'm a senior architect as well. We started the company aiming at having 1 million customers in 5 years. We ended up reaching that goal in 18 months. And then we hit 10 million customers in another 2 years. And then we changed again, like to 100 million customers. 100 million is like half of Brazilian population.
It's not clear that a legacy base of COBOL duct taped together from decades of mergers and acquisitions, it's not clear that that's the ideal platform to build a bank today, which is frankly a mass consumer technology product. We tried to think carefully about what we wanted to build and how we wanted to build it before we launched into typing. We actually didn't know about hammocks back then. We used chairs, and we sat down with a blank piece of paper and said, what is the ideal platform for a bank if we were gonna make a bank now? And one of the things I did at that point in time was read this Out of the Tar Pit paper by Ben Mosley and Peter Marz. They argue that mutable state is sort of the accidental complexity that makes systems really monstrously complex and difficult to debug eventually. And that led us on a research project that initially brought us to Datomic, ironically, and then Datomic brought us to Clojure.
So Ed actually discovered Datomic and said, look, this is a database that looks like a ledger, right? It's a database where all the facts are still there. You can't throw things away. This sounds like a great fit for a bank that doesn't want to be an old school dinosaur bank.
You might think, why does that matter? For a new startup, it's going to be small at the beginning, but the business strategy of Nubank was to become a retail bank. And there really aren't any successful, tiny retail banks that reach the sort of scale that we were aiming for. So we were either going to get big or die trying.
We have over 3,000 Datomic databases, some with over 100 billion datoms. We have 4,000 microservices with Kubernetes. We process 72 billion daily events via Kafka. And we routinely handle millions of requests per second.
The scaling was, I would say, violent. It was so fast, it almost poured concrete over whatever we had started with. In the beginning, had to be good enough because there was no time to go revisit that, so it just scaled up and up and up.
Nubank was a customer of Datomic like others. We just started noticing, over time they grew and grew, and eventually they needed more support from us than ordinary.
But we just realized that this level of involvement needed something more.
The seeds of the acquisition were created when Stu went down to Clojure South and met with the leadership at Nubank. The early idea of bringing the companies together were really sown during that time.
Stu was going down there to act as a consultant, and we started conversations about, maybe we should join forces.
And their culture was built around trying to understand and apply in their context, not just Clojure and Datomic, but the values of the ecosystem. I felt like after that meeting, it was kind of already a done deal.
Acquisitions can carry some baggage, concerns about control, direction, and values. But in this case, there was something deeper. There was actually alignment. Nubank had this mission to simplify banking for Brazilians, and that resonated with Datomic's philosophy of simplicity in software. It's a shared commitment to reducing complexity that made the partnership not only workable, but powerful and beneficial.
With Nubank acquiring Cognitect, there's a lot of uncertainty. You never quite know what's going to happen, but there was a real sense that they were in with both feet and willing to support the language and the people who make the language.
The riskiest part of it, I think, having an independent company that's stewarding a community versus a bank that's stewarding a community is two different things, and I think the bank version of that is rare, right? Maybe unheard of in the history of technology.
Millions of people trust us with their hard-earned money, and we're helping millions of people be empowered with their money. Nubank is the biggest independent bank in the world, and it runs on Clojure and Datomic.
Welcome Nubank in celebration of its listing. To honor the occasion, they are ringing the opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange.
My life really didn't actually change much through the acquisition. I continued to work on the same things I was working on with the same people in the same place, but we had more resources. And over time, we've been able to grow the team with Nubank support. We've been able to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into supporting open source Clojure developers.
They're willing to really put monetary support into Clojure community projects. I think that's been extremely beneficial for the language.
I think Rich's talks were really instrumental in attracting people to New Bank to be able to work with the concepts and the way his clarity at laying out things like in Simple Made Easy. It's clear that he was distilling a massive amount of experience into a very tiny subset of these are the things that really work best. And I think that sort of let's do the best work of our lives. Let's reach for the absolute best tool for the job that we're doing. That is still alive in the culture at New Bank today. I think Rich has a lot to do with that.
So I retired in 2023, a couple of years ago. What I mean by retirement is I no longer work for money. But it doesn't mean I no longer work. And in particular, I'm still actively working on Clojure. I work with the Clojure team. I'm designing features.
We meet every morning at the same time in the same online place, and he knows where that is. And if he wants to join, he'll show up.
He's retired now, except, I had a conversation with Stephanie, his wife, and she says, he kind of sits in the same place around the same gear, kind of looks the same to me. Which I thought was a great comment.
So why would I do that? Well, I think because I'm able to is one reason, but a much more important reason is I do want to get back to that feeling I had when I gave myself that sabbatical, the feeling that I could pursue my ideas without concern for the outcome.
He's likely going to be working on something else. Again, something he's passionate about, something he's really interested in, something he's going to do a lot of deep research on, likely around music. So if you talk about it that way, then no, I don't think he's ever going to retire.
I think it'll be interesting to see when Rich chooses to step down even more from his involvement in Clojure, presumably at some point in the future. I think we have people already in the community who have the wisdom and bearing and interest to do a good job continuing to shepherd it. And the language itself really doesn't need to change that much for it to continue to be a platform for vibrant exploration of computer science ideas and business ideas and whatever other programming things you want to do.
Clojure really introduced the joy of programming back into my life.
We are software engineers at Netflix, and today we're going to talk about a system that we work on, built on Clojure and Datomic.
If you told me in 2007 that nearly 20 years later, people would still be using Clojure and that I would get to travel all over the world talking about it and working with other people, I would have thought you were absolutely out of your mind.
I have a personal mission. I want to continue to take Clojure outside the Clojure community. I want developers to learn about how Clojure loves the messy real world. And I want them to be able to make bulletproof software that's fun to maintain.
There are many, many people that make Clojure great. But I personally think Rich is one of the most important computer scientists of the last 20 years, maybe ever. And it's really all about the way that he approaches problems and problem solving and making that the focus of everything.
I think people underestimate, maybe, that the act of creation is a deeply human act. That it's not, I woke up one day and typed some stuff in. It's not that I happened on a thing. It involves a huge personal effort to explore the ideas, the problems that you're looking to solve, the possible solutions. It's a big investment of self, particularly in this day and age where you can generate code, you can generate a novel. If you have something to say that another person, an audience, a viewer, a user, is going to find impactful to them, that's something to say is human, and it is only human. And that's a view that I have on Clojure, is that this was one person's vision and personal investment. And with all the vulnerability, it's not a story of a thing, it's a story of a person.
If I can advocate anything, do not be afraid. Especially, do not be afraid of being wrong. For my work, the most important thing is freedom, sort of intellectual freedom. And that's something you have to give yourself. I don't think many people will pay you to have intellectual freedom. And so I was very lucky to give myself that opportunity once, and to now be at this end of my career and look at freedom all the way to the finish line. Clojure to me means a bunch of things. It's a project and a product and a tool, something I made and something I created. I think it's a set of ideas which are bigger than it. It is a continuity of Lisp and Lisp tradition, and it's a community. And put together, that's even more powerful. I think it's not something I envisioned as a whole when I started. I was thinking more about the thing I was making, the thing. And the fact that the thing is now part of an ecosystem and a community and a lineage. And a set of ideas, is big for me. It's just all those things, holistically.